You've probably spent more time thinking about your in-game economy rather than your actual economy. You knew exactly how many gold coins you needed to upgrade your armor. You tracked your resources. You never skipped a side quest that paid out. But your emergency fund, your quarterly taxes, yeah, those got a little less attention. But here's the thing though, the financial instincts you've built in those games, they're more useful than you think. We've got 7 of them today, and honestly, number 6 might make you feel slightly embarrassed about how good you already are at this. So I have a friend, I won't name him, but he knows who he is, who spent probably 40 hours optimizing his Stardew Valley farm. 40 hours. He had a spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet tracking crop yields, seasonal revenue, and which artisan goods had the best profit margins. This man could tell you to the day when his cheese press would pay for itself, but his real life savings account had $200 in it. And look, I'm not throwing him under the bus because honestly, that's most of us. We apply this incredible strategic brain to virtual economies and then kind of go blank when it comes to our own. But here's what I've started to notice working with creators. The instincts are the same. The games just made the rules visible. So today we're going to make your rules visible too. 7 things your favorite video game could actually teach you about money. And I think a few of these are going to hit closer to home than you'd expect. Hi, I'm Brad Clark, and this is Money Made Easy for Content Creators. I'm a certified financial planner, and I co-own Finchley Finance, a financial planning company built specifically for content creators and creative business owners. On this podcast, we break down the financial stuff that actually matters to your business, so you can stop worrying about money and get back to creating. Let's jump in. We've got 7 of these today, and they map onto video games you've probably already played. We're talking resource loops, save points, boss fights, the whole thing. And I'll just say up front, number 6 tends to be the one that catches people off guard because it's not actually what you'd expect. Most creators think they're doing the right thing, and it turns out they're actually playing the game wrong. More on that in a minute. Every game has a resource loop, and so does your business. First up, and this one sets the table for everything else on the list. Every game has a resource loop. If you've ever played anything from Minecraft to Stardew to even something like FIFA Ultimate Team, you know what I mean. You collect something, you convert it into something else, you reinvest it, and the loop keeps spinning. The whole game is basically just how efficiently can you run that loop. Your business has one too. Your money comes in from somewhere, brand deals, AdSense, a course, whatever, and then it goes somewhere. The problem is most creators never actually map it out. It just kind of happens. And when you don't know your loop, you can't optimize it. You can't see where resources are leaking, where you're underinvesting, or where one part of the system tends to be choking out another. The creators who tend to feel the most in control of their finances, in my experience, aren't necessarily making the most money. They're the ones who could draw you a picture of their resource loop on a napkin. Income sources, expenses, what goes to taxes, and what gets reinvested, and what actually lands in their pocket. That picture tends to change everything. So here's the actual takeaway from this one. Before you touch anything else on this list, try this. Write down every place money comes into your business. Then write down every place it goes out. Then ask yourself one question. Is there anything on that second list that isn't keeping the lights on or making this loop spin faster? Because in most games, dead resources sitting in your inventory don't help you win. And in your business, money that isn't working or money that you don't even know is leaking out, they do the same thing. That's your resource loop. Map it first. Everything else gets easier once you can see it. Item 2. The tutorial level exists for a reason. Don't skip the basics. And I feel like every creator I've ever talked to has some version of this story. You boot up a new game, the tutorial pops up, and you immediately hit skip. You've played games before. You know how this works. How could it be different? And then 4 hours later, you're completely stuck. You have no idea how the crafting system works, and you're Googling something you definitely would have learned in the tutorial if you had just sat through it. That's the tax conversation I have with a lot of new creators. Here's what tends to happen. Somebody starts making decent money on YouTube or from brand deals, and they just keep going. They don't set up a separate business account. They don't look into quarterly estimated taxes. They don't think about whether an LLC might make sense for them. None of that stuff feels urgent when the money is coming in and the content is flowing. Until it does feel urgent. Usually around February or March when somebody realizes they owe an amount that they weren't expecting and they didn't save for. The basics aren't glamorous. Separating your business and personal finances, understanding that self-employment income tends to get taxed differently than a W-2 employee, knowing roughly what percentage to set aside, none of that is exciting content, but skipping it tends to cost you. Not just money, but time, stress, and occasionally a pretty uncomfortable conversation with the IRS. The tutorial level in your financial life looks something like this: a dedicated business checking account, a rough system for setting aside taxes as you get paid, and at least a basic understanding of what your taxable income might look like at the end of the year. That's it. That's the whole tutorial. It's not long and it's not complicated, but creators who skip it tend to find out the hard way that the game doesn't go back and teach you what you've missed. Item 3. You can't win on one income stream. This one tends to resonate differently depending on where you are in your creator journey. If you're just starting out, it might feel abstract. If you've been doing this a few years, there's a decent chance you've already felt this one in your stomach. Think about any game where you only have one resource type, one weapon, one path, one way to generate income inside the game. Those tend to be the games where one bad event, one ambush, one drought, one bad season in Stardew wipes you out completely. The games that tend to reward long-term players are the ones that give you multiple resource streams and let you build redundancy into your strategy. Creator income works the same way. And I'm not just talking about the classic don't rely on AdSense advice, though that's still true and worth saying. I'm talking about something a little more structural, because here's what tends to happen. A creator builds a really solid income, feels financially stable, and then a platform changes its algorithm, or a brand deal category just kind of dries up, or YouTube adjusts the monetization thresholds. And suddenly that one income stream that felt so solid starts to look more fragile than it did 6 months ago. The creators who weather those moments best, they're not necessarily the biggest ones. They're the ones who build a second stream before they needed it. Maybe that's a digital product. Maybe that's a membership. Maybe it's consulting or coaching on the side. The specific thing matters less than the principle, which is that your financial stability as a creator tends to be directly proportional to how many different ways money can find its way to you. One stream isn't a business, it's a dependency. The game tends to punish single resource strategies eventually. Build the redundancy before you need it. Item 4. Saving your progress matters. Why your emergency fund is basically a save point. Okay, this is the one I mentioned at the top, and I want to set it up right because I think the game analogy here is actually the most accurate one on the whole list. Think about the last time you lost significant progress in a game because you forgot to save, or the game crashed, or you got cocky and pushed too far into a dungeon you weren't ready for. That feeling, that specific sinking, slightly nauseating feeling of watching your progress disappear, is one of the worst feelings in gaming. And the thing that makes it so bad isn't just the lost progress, it's knowing that you actually had the ability to prevent it. The save point was right there, you just didn't use it. An emergency fund is a save point. That's it, that's the whole concept. For creators specifically, this tends to matter a lot more than it does for somebody with a predictable salary, because your income isn't predictable. A slow month, a brand deal falling through, a medical thing, a piece of equipment dying at the worst possible time, any of those could hit you without warning. And if you don't have a save point, you don't just lose a little progress, you might have to start borrowing. You might have to take brand deals you'd otherwise pass on. You might have to make a decision from a place of financial pressure that you'd make differently if you had a cushion. The general guidance for creators tends to be higher than the standard 3 months emergency fund that you'll hear about elsewhere. Because your income varies, 3 to 6 months of expenses, kept somewhere accessible, not invested, just sitting there ready, tends to be a reasonable target to work towards. It's not exciting money, it's not growing aggressively, but it's the reason you don't lose your progress when something unexpected hits. Save your game regularly before the boss fight. This is exactly the kind of thing we build systems for at Finchley. Figuring out the right savings target for your specific income situation, setting up the right accounts, and making sure the pieces are actually in place before you need them. If you want someone to handle this with you, book a first look call at finchley.com. Okay, back to the list. Item 5. Leveling up costs something. Investing in your business the right way. Every creator hits this moment. Things are going well, money is coming in, and you start eyeing upgrades. New camera, better lighting, an editor, a bigger studio setup, maybe a course or a coach. And the instinct to invest in your business tends to be a good one, but the game analogy here is worth paying attention to because games actually teach this really well. In pretty much every RPG or strategy game, leveling up costs resources. And the players who tend to win aren't the ones who spend every resource the moment they get it, and they're not the ones who hoard everything either. They're the ones who ask one question before every upgrade. Does this make my core business run more efficiently? More content, more revenue, more time back? Or does it just look cool? That question tends to cut through a lot of noise when you apply it to your business. A better camera might genuinely improve your retention and help you grow. Or it might be a $3,000 purchase that your audience never actually notices. A video editor might free up 15 hours a week that you reinvest into content and strategy. Or it might just be an expense that stretches you thin before your revenue can actually support it. The upgrade itself isn't inherently good or bad. The timing and the reasoning tend to matter a lot more than the thing. Here's a rough framework that can help. Before any significant business investment, ask 3 questions. 1. Does this directly help me produce more or better content? 2. Does this free up my time in a way I'll actually use productively? 3. Can my current revenue support this without putting pressure on my emergency fund or the amount I set aside for taxes? If the answer to all 3 is yes, it's probably worth considering. If you're stretching to justify one of them, it might be worth waiting. Not every upgrade is worth taking the moment it becomes available. The best players know the difference between leveling up and just burning resources. Item 6, the inventory problem. Why holding too much of the wrong stuff hurts you? Okay, this is the one I teased at the top, and I want to be clear about why this tends to catch people off guard. Because on the surface, it sounds like I'm about to tell you saving money is bad. I'm not. Stay with me. If you've ever played an RPG game with an inventory system, Zelda, Skyrim, Diablo, pick your poison, you know the inventory problem. You've been collecting everything, every item, every material, every piece of loot that might be useful someday. And then you hit a moment where your inventory is completely full and you can't pick up the thing you actually need, and half of what you're carrying is just stuff you've been hoarding just in case. The inventory isn't helping you anymore. It's slowing you down. Here's how this tends to show up in real creator finances. A creator builds a solid chunk of cash, which is great, but then it just sits there in a checking account, earning nothing for months, sometimes years. And I get it. It feels safe. It feels responsible. But there's a point where cash sitting idle stops being a safety net and starts being a missed opportunity. Now, I want to be careful here because this is genuinely nuanced. I'm not saying deploy every dollar the moment you have it. Your emergency fund should absolutely just sit there. Your tax set-aside amount should just sit there. That cash has a job, and its job is to not move. But money beyond that, money that doesn't have a specific job in the next 6 to 12 months, could potentially be working harder than just sitting in a checking account. That might look like a high-yield savings account for money you want accessible but growing. It might look like contributing to a retirement account which, by the way, creators have some genuinely solid options that a lot of people don't know about. It might look like reinvesting strategically into the business. The specific answer depends on your situation, but the principle is the same as the inventory problem. Hoarding everything in one place, just in case, tends to create its own kind of drag. A full inventory feels safe, but it could actually be the thing slowing you down. Item 7. Boss fights are coming. How to prepare for the financial moments that actually matter. All right, last one, and I saved this one for the end on purpose because I think it's the one that ties everything else together. Here's something every experienced gamer knows that newer players tend to learn the hard way. Boss fights are rarely surprises. The game telegraphs them. The music changes, the environment shifts, there's a save point right before the door. The game is basically tapping on your shoulder saying, hey, something big is coming, are you ready? Your financial life does the same thing. The boss fights in your creator business are mostly predictable. Tax season is coming. Every single year. On the same schedule, without exception. A slow content month is coming. Probably more than once. A piece of equipment is going to die at an inconvenient time. A brand deal category is going to dry up. At some point, you're going to want to make a big move. Hire someone, launch something, upgrade your setup in a real way. These aren't surprises. They're scheduled boss fights, and the creators who come out of them intact are the ones who saw the save point outside the door and actually used it. Preparation for these moments tends to look pretty unsexy from the outside. It's setting aside a percentage of every payment for taxes before you spend any of it. It's keeping that emergency fund topped up even when things are going well, especially when things are going well. It's doing a quick financial check-in every quarter so you're not flying blind when the big moments hit. None of that is exciting, but it's the difference between a boss fight that's challenging and one that sends you all the way back to the beginning. And here's the thing about boss fights in games. Once you've beaten it once, you tend to get better at spotting the next one coming. The same tends to be true with your finances. The more you build these habits, the less scary the big moments feel. Not because the moments get smaller, but because you stop showing up to them unprepared. The door is right there. Your save point is right outside. Use it. All right, let's walk through a scenario. This isn't a real client, but it's the kind of situation we see a lot. I'm going to call her Maya. Maya is 29, she's based in Austin, and she's been making content full-time for about 3 years. She runs a lifestyle and personal finance channel. Yeah, a personal finance creator who needed help with her own finances, which honestly tracks more than you'd think. She pulled in around $95,000 last year across YouTube AdSense, 2 reoccurring brand partnerships, and a digital product that she launched about 8 months ago. From the outside, Maya looks like she's figured it out. In a lot of ways she has, but she came to us because of a feeling, and she described it almost exactly this way. I'm making more money than I ever have, and I still feel like I'm one bad month away from a problem. That feeling, it's data, and it tends to point to something pretty specific. So the first thing we do in a situation like Maya's is map the resource loop. Where is money coming in? Where is it going out? And what's actually left at the end? When we do this exercise with creators, there's almost always a few surprises. For Maya, the surprise might look something like her AdSense is actually more volatile than she realized because it's tied to seasonal ad rates. Her brand deals feel stable, but they're both in the same category, which means that if that category pulls back, she could lose both at once. And her digital product revenue, which felt like a bonus, is actually starting to rival her AdSense, which is a signal worth paying attention to. None of these things are emergencies, but none of them are visible if you're not looking at the loop. Next thing we'd probably look at is the save point situation. Maya has some savings, maybe $8,000 in a checking account. But with $95,000 in revenue and expenses that run somewhere around $4,500 a month, between business costs and personal living expenses, that's less than 2 months of coverage. For a creator with variable income and no employer safety net, that tends to feel thin. A more comfortable target for someone in my situation might be somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 months of expenses. So call it $18,000 to around $27,000 in an accessible liquid account. Not invested and not tied up, just kind of sitting there. That's a gap worth closing before almost anything else. Then there's the inventory problem. Maya has been letting cash accumulate in her checking account beyond her operating expenses because it feels safer than doing anything with it, which is understandable, but that account is probably earning close to nothing. For the portion of Maya's cash that sits beyond her emergency fund and her tax set-aside amount, there could be options worth exploring. A high-yield savings account for her near-term reserves, a SEP IRA or solo 401k, which are retirement account options that tend to work well for self-employed creators and could meaningfully reduce her taxable income. These aren't aggressive moves, they're just putting that idle inventory to work. And finally, the boss fight prep. Maya's biggest scheduled boss fight is tax season. She's been setting aside roughly 25% of her income for taxes, which might be in the right neighborhood, but could also be slightly off depending on her actual deductions, her business structure, and how her income mix tends to affect her self-employment tax situation. A quarterly check-in, even just once, every 3 months to look at what's come in, what's been set aside, and whether anything has changed, tends to be the difference between tax season feeling manageable and tax season feeling like it's a surprise boss fight you weren't ready for. So what's the overall picture for Maya? She's not in trouble. She's actually in a pretty solid position. But that feeling that she described, the one bad month away from a problem, tends to come from a specific place. It comes from not being able to see the loop clearly, from having a save point that's a little thin, and from carrying a lot of idle inventory without a system for what to do with it. None of these are hard fixes. They just require actually looking at the picture. That's what a planning conversation tends to look like in practice. It's not scary, it's not complicated. Just let's look at the picture together. All right, before we wrap up, I want to hit a few questions I get asked a lot on this topic. These tend to come up a lot in the first look calls, and honestly, they're worth just addressing directly. First one, I just started making money from content. What's the very first thing I should do? I would say open a separate business checking account. Today, not next week, okay? Like, not when you're making more money, just open it today. The single biggest source of financial chaos I tend to see with newer creators is personal and business money living in the same account. It makes taxes harder, it makes business expense tracking harder, and it makes it almost impossible to actually see how your business is performing. One account just for business. That's the whole answer. Next question. How much should I actually be setting aside for taxes as a creator? The honest answer is it depends. And anyone who gives you a single number without knowing your situation is just guessing. That said, a rough starting point that tends to work for a lot of self-employed creators is somewhere in the 25 to 30% range of your net income. The reason it could be higher than you expect is self-employment tax, which covers Social Security and Medicare, and tends to catch a lot of new creators off guard because an employer used to cover half of that for you. If you're not sure where you land, it's genuinely worth a conversation with a financial planner or a CPA who works specifically with content creators. Third question. I keep hearing I should diversify my income, but I can barely keep up with one stream. Where do I even start? Start by making your existing stream as stable and documented as possible before adding anything new. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but here's the thing. Adding a second income stream on top of a already chaotic first one tends to just create twice the chaos. Get your resource loop mapped. Get your systems in place, and then look at what a second stream could realistically look like given your content, your audience, and your actual bandwidth. The goal isn't to have 5 income streams. The goal is to have streams that don't all go down at the same time. Last one. Is an LLC actually worth it for a content creator? Possibly, but probably not for the reason most people think. A lot of creators want an LLC because they think it means they'll pay less in taxes. That's not actually how it works, and the tax implications of different business structures can get complicated pretty quickly. Where an LLC could genuinely help is on the liability side, creating some separation between your business and your personal finances if something were to go sideways. Whether it makes sense for your specific situation depends on your income level, your state, and what you're actually doing with your business. This is worth a real conversation rather than just a Google rabbit hole. Okay, let's bring this home. Remember my friend with the Stardew Valley spreadsheet? The one who could tell you the exact day when his cheese press would pay for itself but had $200 in his savings account? Here's the thing I didn't mention at the top. He actually did eventually get his finances sorted out. And the thing that clicked with him wasn't a budgeting app or a finance book that he read. It was realizing that he'd been applying a completely different level of strategic thinking to a fake economy than he was to his real one. The instincts were there the whole time. He just hadn't aimed them at the right thing yet. That's really what today's list comes down to. Not that you need to learn a bunch of new skills. You probably already have most of them down. You know how to manage resources. You know how to prepare for hard moments. You know that hoarding everything in one place eventually slows you down. You know that skipping the tutorial tends to cost you later. You've been applying these instincts for years, just in a different context. The one big shift is this. Aim that strategic brain at your actual finances. Map the loop. Build the save point. Don't hoard idle inventory. Prep for the boss fight you can already see coming. You don't need to be a financial expert to do any of that. You just need to actually play the game. You've got the skills. Now use them where it counts. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If any of this hits close to home, the save point, the inventory problem, the boss fight you've been ignoring, and you want to actually get a plan in place, that's exactly what we do at Finchley Finance. You can book a first look call at finchley.com. It's a no-pressure conversation where we just look at your situation together and figure out where to start. If you got something out of today's episode, share it with a content creator friend who could use it, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. You can also find us on Instagram at Finchley Finance for more of this stuff in between episodes. Thanks for listening. I'm Brad Clark, and this has been Money Made Easy for content creators. Now, go get back to what you love.
Brad Clark is a financial advisor, and Lucinda Clark is a registered administrative assistant of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Finchley Finance is located at 15072 Snowsill Drive, Frisco, Texas, 75035. Brad offers securities through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views expressed on this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for an individual. Neither Cetera nor its representatives may give legal or tax advice. The views and opinions contained in this material are those of the author and not necessarily the opinion of Cetera, and not a recommendation or solicitation to buy or sell any securities or investment products mentioned herein. This information is from sources believed to be reliable, but Cetera Wealth Services, LLC cannot guarantee or represent that it is accurate or complete. Guests on the show are not affiliated or registered with Cetera Wealth Services, LLC unless specifically stated. Any information provided by the guest is in no way related to Cetera Wealth Services, LLC or its registered representatives. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Any references to specific companies, platforms, brands, or products through this podcast, including but not limited to social media platforms, content distribution services, affiliate programs, e-commerce platforms, or consumer brands, are made solely for educational and contextual purposes relevant to the content creator industry and primarily to distinguish a company's goods or services, establish context, and prevent listener confusion. Such references do not constitute a research report, investment recommendation, solicitation, or endorsement of any kind and should not be interpreted as advice to buy, sell, or hold any security instrument or to participate in any particular trading strategy. Finchley Finance and its representatives do not hold Series 86 or 87 registrations and do not publish research reports. Opinions expressed by the owners of this content do not reflect an endorsement by Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, or its affiliates. Any hypothetical examples, scenarios, or case studies discussed in this podcast are illustrative only and do not represent the actual performance of any specific investment, strategy, or individual. Any figures, percentages, dollar amounts, or numerical examples used may be hypothetical or illustrative in nature and are not intended to represent guaranteed outcomes, specific investment returns, or verified third-party data unless explicitly stated otherwise. All information herein has been prepared solely for informational purposes. Past performance does not guarantee future results. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal, and there could be no assurance that any investment strategy may be successful. Words or phrases that may appear absolute, predictive, or superlative in nature, such as will, always, never, best, should, would, or similar language, are used conversationally for clarity and educational purposes only, and should not be interpreted as promises, guarantees, predictions, or endorsements of any specific financial outcome, strategy, or product for any individual listener.